We can feel lucky that the interpersonal dynamic is so good here that we can sometimes skate by with little preparation, Alex. We tune in for the camaraderie and banter.
I mean, this to me is much more like kind of like housewives of media, you know? What are they called?
The Real Housewives of Media?
In the Real Housewives of Media, that's what we're calling it.
Welcome to People vs. Algorithms. I'm Brian Morrissey, joined as always by Alex Schleifer and Troy Young. We got a lot to discuss, even though we're going into Labor Day weekend, and it's usually a slow time for news. But as you guys know, I like to focus on narratives, and I think I have sensed that the narrative has been slowly changing in all of this AI stuff. So NVIDIA had another great earnings report. Sales were up 56%.
Not good enough, apparently.
But not good enough. Sales that beat up 56% is not good enough. So they lost a couple points on their market cap. They're barely over, $4 trillion now? It's tough times at NVIDIA. But I think behind this is, I think we're entering into this a little bit of a mini trough of disillusionment with AI. And it's where it matters, which is productivity growth and, businesses asking, what are we getting for all of this money we're spending on AI? Because all of the hyperventilation over AI overturning the economy, and we shouldn't even worry about our 401ks because we're not going to have jobs or might not even exist in 15 years, is running up against reality, which always happens in these booms, which generally, infrastructure spending gets ahead of people being able to put it to productive use. And MIT had this viral study, I guess, that claimed that 95% of generative AI projects at companies are failing. There's been other research by McKinsey that backed this up. They said 8 in 10 companies have generative AI projects, and that just about the exact same amount said they're not having any impact whatsoever. This is when something like 61.9 billion, according to IDC, is being poured into generative AI by businesses. Kind of an inevitable phase. Even Sam Altman, ever the carnival barker, is looking to get ahead of this in a little briefing he had with reporters. I think he took him out to dinner, which is always a nice thing to do with reporters.
How did you feel about that, by the way? I was listening to the Hard Fork with the guys, and they were talking about their dinner with Sam Altman. Something didn't feel right, but I'm not a reporter. How did that feel to you? Would you go for dinner? Would you get treated for tapas?
Would I? Oh yeah, for sure.
100%.
My role as a reporter was I would take anything consumable, so meals were okay. Yeah,
Right, okay.
I mean maybe not per se. Although I went to 21. Was it 21? I forget. What was the fancy restaurant in
11?
In Union Square? Yeah,
11 Madison.
I had the best, one of the best meals of my life at 11 Madison.
Yeah, it's like being served, weirdly cooked carrots by fascists.
Yeah, you get something on your plate and it doesn't look like much, but then unbelievable flavors. So I don't regret that one bit whatsoever.
I have more questions, but I don't think that's what the episode
I'd rather
is about.
stick my hands in, a collective meal that we share together of, hummus and, shish taouk.
Ethiopian food's good for that. A lot of communal hand to hand. Even Sam Altman was basically coming close to the B word with the overexuberance in investing. This is a pattern in all of these booms. It happened with railroads. I think we all dealt with it, like in the .com era.
The funny thing is the .com, Brian, I remember, the internet is going to remake how we shop and how we communicate, and it will restructure how we organize suburban communities because we will order shit online and it will be delivered to us in trucks and all of that. And all of it happened. Eventually, all of it happened. You can buy anything you want online. You can order Starbucks and go pick it up, but there's still a Starbucks and there's still a Walmart.
Right.
Yeah.
But there's always that lag. And that's what Gartner in their hype cycle had called the Trough of Disillusionment. And it is a very reliable phenomenon. It always happens with these. And I don't know, am I wrong? I sense that it's happening right now. There's just, the vibes are turning into where's the beef? And so you have these parallel realities where we still hear all about the comic book fantasies, and they get more outlandish as we go on. I mean, I've been listening. You ever listen to Dwarkish Patel's podcast? I think he's actually AI generated.
You know, we wrote about him last week, Brian, or the week before.
Did we? I don't even remember.
He's the hyper media consumer.
It's very interesting. I had this theory that Silicon Valley is creating these media personalities in like a lab somewhere.
Well, he's a baby Tyler Cohen, right? Like he wants to know everything. He wants to be the world's greatest polymath.
Well, yeah. And I've long held prodigies with a little bit of disdain. So I have a bias against prodigies.
Well, I almost pulled my car over when I was listening yesterday to Diary of a CEO on the way out to shelter with this chief business officer from Google, Mo Gaudat, who, you know, talked about the coming AI singularity where all the evil people will be replaced by a kind of omniscient, powerful AI that governs all things, and that we will live after 15 years of turmoil in some kind of blissful communal AI state.
Wait, when does this begin?
I think it'll take 15 or 20 years.
But so it starts in 2027?
You know what's funny with all that stuff is that they keep telling us that AI is going to get smart enough to give us a bunch of answers, but we have a bunch of answers today and we can't just get our shit together. You know,
well, this
like we know vaccines work, but that's a thing. And it's not like an AI is going to come in and change everybody's minds and we're going to get to do that. But
you think people will be the problem?
They always are the problem.
I think if I ask ChatGPT today, hey, how do I solve, you know, how are ways to solve X and Y issue? It'll come up with, you know, stop doing wars, give people healthcare. I don't know. There's a lot of ways to do things better, but we still don't do them or we can never agree. So I don't think an AI is going to solve it.
These radical productivity changes outside of maybe, you know, Apollo losing a couple of analysts to an AI modeling software package. I asked Brian about this today, like, where does it really start to rear its head? And
we have 4.2% unemployment. Explain to me where we're not growing that fast outside of these data centers. Well, we would have robotic
strawberry pickers, Brian. We would have, you know, self-driving semis.
I think is also happening? You know what I think is happening? I think, like, just to split up the conversation a little bit, there's all that like AGI, God AI shit conversation, which I think is like really only there to tickle the people talking about it and get investors excited. I actually feel like the general population isn't very interested or even scared about this, that nobody wants to hear it. And I think as things are moving forward, they're noticing that it's going to be very, very hard and nearly maybe impossible to reach there. So, and then there's this other side, which is the productivity side, which we should be seeing productivity gains already with the tools that we already have. It's just, I think there's an integration problem. We don't quite know how these tools integrate into the workflows.
Well, the best visual metaphor, Alex, was the Chinese robot Olympics, watching the robots play soccer. Did you see that?
Yeah, it's not Terminator yet.
They're not very good at it.
They look like Americans playing soccer?
Even worse, yeah.
I always notice that Europeans keep the ball like on the ground at all times, and then when you see an American like passing the ball, it bounces a lot. It gives me no confidence with the American team.
But you know, I think robotics is potentially transformational, and there have been lots of leaps, and you know, it's one of those things where it's going to move slowly and potentially move fast. But I think we have seen productivity gains in Silicon Valley, ironically, and it's not because I think AI has proven to be particularly useful yet. It's because it's given companies ground cover to fire a bunch of managers. You know?
Yeah, that leads me to a Starbucks rant, Alex. Which is really the most disgusting place on earth.
It's really expensive.
Well, I sat in one yesterday waiting for my order of my disgusting breakfast sandwich. They absolutely don't know how to make food.
They shouldn't do food.
You know what? Like, listen, I've gone public, I've gone on the record before with the fact that an Egg McMuffin is a good product. and it's still prepared,
Yes.
seemingly on the griddle.
It is better than the Starbucks one. I'll give
The
you that.
Starbucks, there's 3 of them. They're disgusting.
It's like airline food.
And
they're basically
watching
serving
these
airline food.
young
Yeah.
people make the drinks that America wants to consume, like now we're in pumpkin spice season, just like goo and stuff coming out of pumps and all the crap that they put in there and whipped cream on the top. Like, whatever happened to just getting a coffee? But like, if AI is going to be fully realized, Brian, a Starbucks becomes a giant dispenser, like a robotic dispenser. It has to. But I don't want that.
You don't even need a robot. I mean, okay, a couple of things on that, because we opened one of Troy's extra tabs on our browser here. So audience, keep track of, we have multiple tabs open now.
I was going to open it. I was going to do, I was going to segue that into my,
Yeah, we had a nice segue.
observation
You
of
rehearsed
Serbian,
this, Alex,
of
when you
Serbian
were-
coffee.
Well,
I was
I
going to
just
do a
wanted to
Serbian
say-
coffee review.
Well, I also, I mean, I have a British coffee review. I realized something. First of all, Starbucks is in trouble. Luckin Coffee, the Chinese brand, is kind of starting to move into the US, and they're like a no frills, like cheap coffee thing. And I think that's what most people want from a Starbucks. But I notice also, like, there's a difference between the way the same brands have evolved in Europe and in America. Starbucks in America is where you go when there's nothing else or you really need to take a shit, right? Like, that's where you go. Starbucks in Europe is still kind of a thing. And I think the European consumers maybe will complain more, but they're getting a way better deal than in the US. We're constantly being, like, the quality of the products constantly being reduced, and we're just taking it. Like, Starbucks has become a hellhole. And you know what? It doesn't even need AI to be turned into an automated coffee machine. When I went to England, every gas station, they have a chain there called Costa, which is their local Starbucks. Every gas station has a Costa, like, you boop on a screen and a cup comes out. It tastes exactly the fucking same.
Yeah.
Because it's just an automated espresso machine.
Flat
Because
white.
like it or not,
Did you take a shit there?
No, I actually went and, I think it's actually way easier in Europe to find bathrooms. But honestly, like, why do you go to Starbucks? They're trying to refresh that brand and turn it into a neighborhood coffee shop. And the thing is that people want just a neighborhood coffee shop. They don't want
have
Starbucks.
a beautiful Starbucks in Italy. And my theory about it, I went by a beautiful one in Rome. And I think they have to up their game because, they're supposedly an Italian, quote unquote, style coffee shop. And so they can't roll out, the Union Square Starbucks there.
Well, they have that premium
up
brand, Brian, that they've released in
The roastery?
Yeah, they have one in Shanghai that's extraordinary.
There's one in Tokyo that is a temple. It's literally a temple.
I think every American should travel and then realize how differently we're being treated here by the same brands in Europe. Like, you go to a McDonald's in Austria, and you want to dress up for it. Like, it's
yeah.
and here it kind of smells weird. You're not sure what's going on.
That's funny you say that, because the McDonald's in Belgrade is like, the McDonald's there are lovely. They're interesting architecturally. And even the Starbucks
night.
there. Interestingly, I like the Starbucks there because they do it in Cyrillic, and Starbucks in Cyrillic, the brand gives it a little
something.
exoticism.
Well, I think the enshittification of everything we get in the US, everything that scales, is maybe an education, right? Because I think we get a lot of great new things, but they always get worse. Like, they always get worse over time.
Can I do my quick Serbian coffee review? So when I don't like Italian coffee personally, but when I go to Serbia, they have this thing called domaća, which is like domestic, like house, like coffee, but it's their like Turkish coffee, which they don't call Turkish coffee for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
But the Turks, used to rule over Serbia for centuries, and they left behind kebabs, which are now cevapi, which is like the buffalo wing in the Balkans, but also domaća. And it is I used to find this offensive, but I really got into extremely strong cup of coffee. The grounds are in it, so you can't get too aggressive with it. It's gritty. It will wake you up, and you don't want to.
Did they read your future? You flip you flip the cup around, and all the grit kind of pours down it, and then you read somebody's future from it. It's great.
No, just a grim-faced waiter brought
That
it to
entire
Grunter.
neck of the woods is great because wherever you go, you just say whatever the country is coffee and you get yourself a Turkish coffee. You just never say Turkish unless you're in Turkey.
You just don't say the Turkish part.
Yeah.
And then they sort of deny that. They just rebrand it. Okay, so can we move on to rebrands real quick?
Sure.
There's no segue here. There was, did you see this is a
Did we dispense with the AI hype segment of the show?
Yeah.
Are we done?
Yeah.
I mean, we open up so many tabs. I don't even know where that tab is anymore.
Yeah.
Oh, no, but
do you want to continue?
Just to wrap that up, it was striking how Sam Altman downplayed the AI hype after ChatGPT came out. I think
GPT-5, yeah.
GPT-5 came out. I think a lot of that kind of bravado comes out when you need a bunch of money. Just some information I had. I was invited to maybe participate at $300 billion. A week later, it moved up to 500 billion. So I think that's the numbers that they shared. And I just got invited to participate in, what is the other one? Anthropic at $170 billion. And all of these places are having no problem raising money. So I think they don't even need the hyperbole anymore. That's what's happening. You know what I mean? Like
I didn't get these invitations.
You didn't? Oh, you're
No.
not in the right WhatsApp group. No, we just talk about it at the club. But it just shows like, there's a bunch of these companies able to raise a bunch of money. There's all this kind of secondary influx of money that's feeding these startups that are all kind of buying services or product from the NVIDIAs and the OpenAIs. And it does feel like, feel like a bubble. B feels like also some people are trying to make it a soft landing where I think we're going to see the AGI talk like kind of fade. And at some point they're going to go, AGI what? No. This is just about automating Starbuckses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
B2B SaaS. The B2B SaaS.
That's where the money is. There's also an adoption problem where people have adopted, obviously ChatGPT, 700 million users, incredible while traveling. People adopt it in their daily lives. People aren't adopting it as quickly in their work. For various reasons. And it feels a little bit like the first PCs at work where companies really had to force people to use them. And so now we're getting news that companies are asking their employees to report in as to what they've done with AI. So they're getting a little desperate, like lots of companies in Silicon Valley doing that.
Yeah, when you look at that MIT study and the other studies and you dig into it just like one tab, the biggest hindrances are human at the end of the day and resistance from people for obvious reasons, but also just organizational, companies are disorganized just by rule.
Companies people are, and you too, and also like, I think people are the problem in both ways. Some people just don't want to use it. I think there's a general, disgust with it sometimes to generate certain types of tasks. But on the other side, it sounds like in at least some research that some engineers are very optimistic about it, and they thought they did it 20% faster, but actually research shows that it was 20% slower. It's just that they didn't notice.
Well, I think we'll see a kind of social bifurcation where on one side we do have sort of guitar strumming, kind of hippie-like creatures making coffee by hand, around a fire, singing folk songs, talking about the beauty of interpersonal relations. And on the other side, chip-enhanced, kind of techno humans that pay fealty to the god of AI, that look for a way off of Earth and the rise of superintelligence that makes society governable.
Which direction will you go?
I think I'm going to hang by the campfire, to be honest. I didn't,
really?
but I'll probably have I
think you'll have one foot in both worlds.
Yeah, I think I'll do a little bit. I like tech,
Troy enjoys a barista that acts like he's better than him.
You gotta watch out for the Australian coffee places. They're real coffee snobs.
Yeah, and they're good. They're good at it.
They're good at it.
A flat white in Sydney is high order.
Oh, yeah, I agree with John Cena has a whole little YouTube video of how a flat white in Australia is like the best flat white you can get.
Oh.
Okay, I'm gonna close this tab now. I had a Cena tab open.
Okay, Brian, over to you.
There's no segue to this, but have you guys been keeping tabs on the Cracker Barrel in Broglio?
Yeah.
They changed their logo. I am a sucker for logo changes, rebrands, because they're always divisive and they're perfect summer stories. If you want to drop one of these in like August, get a lot of people upset. People get upset when logos get changed. Cracker Barrel changed. This is part of an overhaul. I honestly did not know Cracker Barrel still existed. And I've never set foot in a Cracker Barrel in my life. I don't know if you guys have. Anyway, they had an old-timey logo featuring this kind of old-time guy in there. And it's a brand that I guess some people feel very strong about. They did a very bland logo that immediately became seized upon by like the alt-right as being a woke logo, I guess. They're looking to modernize the menu, spruce up the store. Maybe they had some sort of like Pride Day or something in the office. Trump weighed in, actually. He got involved in this. He said that they could use the negative press to their advantage if they acted quickly. And you know what? They followed the guy's advice and they rolled back the logo change. Their stock had dropped 12% on this thing. And then it bumped back up 3%. Kind of amazing that these rebrands immediately become political. I always looked askance at the idea that CMOs were being brave, but maybe they are being brave these days, because you make any change to one of these brands, all of a sudden you're going to get accused of being like too woke. You guys have been part of rebrands, right? Alex, were you part of the Airbnb logo change that people said that looked like a vagina?
Yeah, I just joined as it was happening. I became kind of the face of a lot of the design stuff there. So I got the brunt of like the testicle jokes and the tits. But I mean, no rebrand's ever easy. This is a little different.
I mean, if you want a metaphor for a nice place to stay, a vagina's, reasonable.
Yeah. And it's, whoever looked at it would see what they want. It was kind of like a mirror. I think the Cracker Barrel, the thing is like, the Cracker Barrel logo, it's actually not bad, like technically, the way they kind of managed to carry
the old
over.
Logo? Well, I guess
No, the new logo as a transition, if you're going to do a change like that, it's technically pretty good. And it would have modernized it. And it's the type of thing that Olive Garden did, just a little while ago. And nobody complained about that. But apparently the old man like nobody would, in today's world, it's very hard to keep a logo that is so complicated just from a technical point of view. It just shows that you can turn anything into a thing, right? Like,
yeah, content.
And it's that alt-right grievance machine is really, really kind of like activated and ready to go whenever something like that happens.
There's this guy,
I'm sure people are
weirdly named, no relation, Robbie Starbuck, who it's his entire career is
cool name.
Seemingly is to start these religious wars over these little corporate marketing things.
Yeah.
Strange way to spend your time.
Yeah, but underneath of it all, gentlemen, I have been to a Cracker Barrel, and it has a special place in our family's road trips.
Yeah, like
and
a chicken fried steak?
I like, you go there for breakfast, and I like the little store that's there that has the little junk peg games and little fun family stuff.
Oh, wait, it has a store? Yeah, tell us, because you've been invited into one. These are your people. So what do you...
I did not expect Troy to be the man of the people.
It's an old-timey kind of diner place that's meant to, feel nostalgic, and it has a little store that you can go, buy little trinkets in. It's like a souped-up gas station store, and they... grew roadsides next to places where you get gas, and kind of grew with with interstate travel, and are beloved by many, and feel like, you're going somewhere that was, the sort of anti-fast food place, and that it felt old and traditional and all of that. And that's what they were marketing. So I don't really understand why they want to turn it into something that feels like a sort of more clinical, Olive Garden kind of modern, what do they call those? Fast serve restaurant, that category?
Fast casual.
Fast casual,
that's it.
That dominates, like suburban neighborhoods. And so to me, the brand, the nostalgia is this sort of anchor in the brand. So why you would dispense with that makes no sense to me. And I don't know. I think that they were, the obvious observation is that, there was too many old people coming, not enough youngs, and they wanted to make it feel more contemporary. So they sharpened it up a bit, and that was reflected in the design of the restaurants and all that. And I suspect that that's not why people go there.
I don't think people were complaining about the marketing strategy, but that's insightful. I don't disagree with you, but it just, after the Sydney Sweeney thing and this, it's just like, I wouldn't want to be in marketing,
Yeah, maybe they are brave. I have to take back my whole shtick.
Then maybe they deserve to spend a week in Cannes not really doing anything. They do. Because it's a hard job.
I apologize to all the
I was
marketers.
more put off by the knuckleheads over at MSNBC talking about their rebrand than
holy shit.
They're MS Now.
MS Now. But you kind of add insult to injury where you have that new mark combined with, I don't know, just that cable news feels so out of step with how we consume now. And to have them talking, but did you know that the MS referred to Microsoft? What are you talking about? Of course, we knew that, or we didn't know that. But the woman from Morning Joe was like, I did not know that, which is surprising to me.
Her own company?
Yeah, that makes us trust their judgment when reporting the fucking news. But it's amateur.
Is there anybody more insufferable than Joe? Morning Joe. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
I mean, it's something you would watch.
Type MS Now into a browser, right, and it takes you to a Chinese holding page for the domain. It's complete amateur. It feels like a kind of like a mark of shame, like somebody's punishing them. Now you're gonna have to do this.
But a serious question: is there a way to do this without igniting ire? I just have. I never see anyone.
Never.
Right?
No. Never. But there's a ways to do it where you can see, as a professional, where you can see this is going to blow over, and in the end, everybody's going to love it or be excited about it. Right?
Okay, so give me a recent rebrand that you, as a professional, thought this was elegantly done.
I think it doesn't even need to be elegantly done. I just think it needs commitment. And I think even though I was, poo-pooing the strategy, Meta's rebrand, people have moved away from things. That's stuck. People have moved away from Facebook. The name is broad enough for it's even kind of being moved away from the metaverse analogy, and now Meta is a thing. And I feel that it's very feasible to do that. Do you have any others, Troy?
Oh, yeah, I was just thinking about that. What are the big brands in my life that
X?
No.
X is a good example. Yeah.
Really?
It's worked. I think people call it X now.
Yeah.
How about the Washington Bullets to the Washington
They should
Wizards?
bring that back.
Yeah.
That was a terrible rebrand.
I mean, sports fans are just the worst, but yeah. If you get embroiled into a political debate, the problem now is that it gets amplified way to the top, right? And that's maybe you want that. Maybe some brave CMOs will do stuff that's essentially done to piss off.
Well, this brings me to the idea that we are all critics now. We're the masses are critics. We're in a populist era, and I think we're seeing a continuation of the decline of cultural criticism. I know, Troy, this is an issue near and dear to your heart, so I want to give it over to you.
I noticed that there were a few articles this week on this sort of changes in the landscape of cultural criticism. And they were the Guardian writing about how the New York Times reassigned people on the cultural bench to do other things, how is it the Chicago Times, Brian? They killed their movie critic. It was
not literally, right?
Oh, that was a public.
You can't do that.
It was this great piece in the New Yorker about how music criticism had become softer, highlighting, how the normally stingy and now beaten down Pitchfork had, started to hand out higher rankings, their infamous decimal system. And I'll come back to that in a second. And, I remember there was a famous kind of Pitchfork review that set the tone in 2006 for the site, where they gave this band Jet They had an album called Shine On. Instead of a written review, they gave it a 0.0 and embedded a video of a chimpanzee urinating on itself. And it became part of the kind of pitchfork ethos where, criticism is performance, and that's kind of, what made that brand. But, I was just thinking about it because I read reviews on Pitchfork, but I skim them and I find them useful navigation still to this day. And I had found a review of an album from a band called Water From Your Eyes, a band that I didn't know about, and was kind of delighted to read that the review was, very Pitchfork-esque, and they gave it an 8.3. So there's no friction in sampling music. So a music review is like, yeah, I'll read a couple of sentences. I don't need 1,000 words. I'll go over to, Spotify or wherever I get my music from and sample the album, and that's enough. And it made me think of how I use reviews, really. And I find them, useful in some categories. Like I like to read a food review on Eater or Infatuation, or even a longer one if it's well written on the New York Times, because I'll go, I'll check the restaurant out. I don't read a lot of, film criticism, although I'll look at the short ones. But it did remind me of, the great New Yorker film reviewer Pauline Kael. And I went back and looked at some of her reviews, and they were, rewarding in and of themselves. She did this one for The Godfather that feels, shockingly current in how it characterizes the kind of mobification of the U.S. economy. And now we see that manifest in government. But, mostly reviews have been outsourced to the commons, places like Letterboxd or, some dude's review on TikTok, or obviously a Rotten Tomato score that shows up in a Google search. And, long form professional, criticism, feels like, I don't know, falconry. It's like out at, it's not part of how we operate now. But the one thing I do think will never die is the sort of profile review. And there, it's just sort of like, when I think of these things, it's sort of like, how would I, apply a narrative to my journey this week and, things that I read or stumbled upon. And there was a really brilliant profile of Mac DeMarco, who's sort of, singular in his indiness, and is, grew up in Edmonton. And, I always like to favor my Canadian, cultural icons, of which he is definitely one. And it was a review, or it was a profile of him moving to the San Juan Islands from Los Angeles and kind of living a little bit kind of off the land there. And it really helped me understand who he is and what he represents and why he is so singular, unique in a singular way as an artist. And he has a new album this week called Guitar. So I don't know. I think that in some, I do appreciate something that's well crafted, but the category is definitely no longer.
Yeah. I mean, This is the decline of institutions and gatekeepers, just writ small, isn't it? To me, it's been going on. Really, the advent of algorithms did away with the need for this kind of gatekeeping. I think we've discussed this before. I feel like there's a set of people who are annoyed by this because they put in the work, and now you don't have to put in the work. Like, you don't have to put in the work. You let Spotify do the hard work. You let the algorithms do the hard work.
It's funny because these are all, I think, behaviors that used to be normal for people who were extremely online 10 years ago. I mean, which I count myself one, like you'd check on Reddit or you'd use some tools that did recommendations. And a lot of these things have just become really commoditized, right? Like Spotify and Apple Music do a decent job at recommending music. Now, it does keep you kind of isolated from new things. But then TikTok and even YouTube, where you have Anthony Fantano and stuff like that, it can be a pretty good business if you have 1-2 million subscribers. you listen to records, you say what you think about them, you get your audience. But it's
He's
like
made a business out of reviewing music, right, on
yeah,
YouTube.
exactly. And he's a personality, and he just needs a webcam, right? Like it's not a. And I find the idea of like paying staff to write reviews in a magazine has seemed crazy to me for the past 10 years. And then even with restaurant, there's certain products that I will read reviews from. They're usually like higher price points, like a video game, which is $50 or something like that. But with AI, like I even noticed that the restaurant reviews, like I just traveled and used ChatGPT nearly exclusively, just telling me like, I'm in this neighborhood, give me the top 5 restaurants that are like highly rated, but not like, not like kind of ruined by tourists or whatever that is.
Yeah,
and
you got to watch those TikTok places. They're the worst.
Yeah, exactly. And so you can filter, ChatGPT is the ultimate algorithm at your fingertips. And I got quotes from like, here's what the eater says, and here's what I never went to these websites. So they're doing the work for free, and Reddit is doing the work for free. So there's so much access to this stuff now.
But I think that's where
I feel more educated than ever.
The new gatekeeping is the Google Doc. You get the Google Doc someone puts together, which is their well curated list they just share with like close friends. And like those kind of recommendations are more, and maybe that's different than criticism, but I think it's all in the same sort of milieu because unless you're just enjoying, look, with criticism, cultural criticism, it is a form, it's an art form in some ways. Like I would read the Anthony Lane, film criticism because like he's a great writer and he has flair more so than like for the utility of it.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some movie reviewers just like separate themselves from their publication and just start doing their own YouTube channels where they do these little 10-minute movie reviews, which I listen to. And I think you can kind of survive as an individual if you've built up a reputation, but I don't think there's a media business in it per se.
Let's talk about the sort of shifting nature of the web, something we always talk about. And apps are back in some ways.
Were they ever gone?
Well, I feel a shift when it comes to like, the miniature industry that is known as publishing. Obviously, the open web is, if not dead, it's dying. And for a lot of publishers, apps had a moment, but the problem is their business models were so premised on scale and getting people to web pages that they chose the open web over apps. And now the game has completely changed. It's all about direct connections. It's about smaller, more durable audiences. And newsletters, et cetera, that'll get you data. But the app is kind of back in some ways. I mean, look at the New York Times app. It is a good product. And we'll talk about the Times a little bit. But Troy, what do you see going on with apps? Are apps back?
I think that it was almost impossible for something as niche as say a magazine media brand to create in the era of Google and Facebook kind of traffic generation to make good app creation profitable or worthwhile for the publisher. Not only that, it presupposed the strength and connection and velocity of content that almost never existed. And it didn't really follow the behavior of the consumer. So people would, create apps that were sort of an aggregation point for their content, and no one would ever use it. And what the promise was, however, was real, which was a closer to the metal experience that was more elegant. I feel like publishers were more restrained in their, app experiences such that they weren't kind of littered with ads and kind of broken experiences in the same way the web was. Apps handle video and audio much better, obviously, they also handle kind of authenticated persistence and coherent experience better than the web does. But they never became a big part of the media sort of experience outside of big news providers. And what's happened, I think, is because the whole cable industry shifted to streaming, apps became way more important, whether that was on your TV or on your phone or your computer, because that's how those media experiences are delivered. And you're right, Brian, like New York Times or FT or Wall Street Journal. I mean, I consume all of those via apps.
Well, the FT's app sucks, but go on.
I mean, I think it's better than the web experience. And so the weird thing about apps, though, is that the ecosystem is controlled by two companies, and they decide how revenue is split, and they also decide who gets promoted. And so we've seen, some consternation around that with Elon suing Apple. His contention is that they are privileging OpenAI in their App Store listings. And, apps are really, really important to the biggest, most important utilities and experiences in our digital world. And that's AI, communications, and streamers.
The funny thing is that
And
the
games.
apps, yeah, and games. And the funny thing is that actually the App Store is notoriously terrible at surfacing, discovery for new apps. So the fact that he's suing them, saying that they have all that power, is interesting. And also, I think it's because he didn't reach the top, 1 or whatever when they released the new Grok, but DeepSeek managed to do it. I mean, it's interesting because, you're still kind of paying the 30% tax on all apps. So it must be, their data must be showing that it's immensely valuable to have the app. And yet I think that's also being supported by the fact that I think, especially Apple, but Google in some ways, is diminishing the capabilities of the browser so the apps feel more powerful. A lot of these apps are essentially websites, but just having the icon, the way the UI is built, the way it promotes and prioritizes what so-called native apps, essentially makes it better to shove a website into a deliverable app package than just a website, because they make it so difficult to use the open web because they're incentivized, right? Why wouldn't you? Right? The second you have the app installed, now you get 30% of every transaction.
I know it's a discussion within sort of industry circles. It's a big deal, but it hasn't faced really consumer backlash. It hasn't hurt its brand. It's outrageous tax on these apps. I mean, the 30% take rate is it's obscene, really. I mean, it's one thing I feel like anyone outside of Apple can be pissed off about together.
I mean, I don't think consumers don't see it.
If we were to break up anything, it would be their monopoly on that distribution point. I think that would be extremely valuable.
But until very lately, you haven't been until very lately with kind of some of the latest court rulings, you haven't even been able to say that there was another option.
Yeah. It's crazy. The Epic lawsuit is just, it's hard. It's not hard to pick a side in that. I feel like maybe I'm wrong. Most issues are not black and white. This one feels, this actually filtered down into the Substack world, because Substack has moved, they moved into this app. And I actually, when I left Substack, because I saw the direction they were going, which was the same as any sort of platform, and lock-in comes after that. And of course, they raised the big funding round, and guess what? They are now taking, Apple subscriptions through Apple. The problem with that is not only do you have the tax, which they are passing on to the consumer, so you actually pay more for the app through Apple, but you're not able to keep your subscriber data. So the whole point of Substack was the idea that, the creator, in quotes, owns the subscriber relationship. And they were able to do that because they're just a wrapper around Stripe. And with that portability gone, now they can point the finger at Apple, but all of a sudden they have lock-in with their publishers, which is no bueno.
I mean, even more, what a lot of this points back to, outside of the transactional subscription experience and the toll you're describing, is the utter failure of the ad model of the open web. And, part of it is I think what is kind of true is that doing two things at once is kind of impossible for humans. And so, advertising alongside content, to me, is a difficult proposition. At least magazines had sequential advertising, which I think worked far better, where you would go page of content, page of advertising, page of content, page of advertising. but the display experience, faced with eroding traffic and yield, all that's happened is even what I think of as sophisticated publishers that gave a shit, if briefly, about the consumer experience are littering the things with, permanent banners at the bottom of the pages and floating video players. And, the web is becoming, it's been said many times, but it's just becoming unusable. And I think that sits in sharp contrast to the people that have, an app-led subscription flywheel where you can have a decent media experience. And all it's going to do is mean that there's a few winners and lots of junk on the web. And you get this kind of bifurcation where you have, kind of something that looks like the old media world where you have an oligopoly of large media companies that can support a decent experience. And then you have Reddit on the other side, or YouTube, that, that are driven by individuals, and that all of the websites that sit in the middle become this kind of giant trash heap. And underneath of it all, it is that the paywall model, the web-based paywall and advertising model is shit, period.
The irony of it is, though, that it's still like the web is still a big part of the funnel to get you to download an app. The actual internal app ecosystems, the app stores, the Google Play stores are really bad at discovery. They're trying to get people
discovery
to
works on the web because of Google and because you have control of your experience. Ironically, though, commerce works fine on the web, Alex. Like a Shopify store on the web works just fine.
Oh, they've solved the payment issue, right? Like you basically are logged in.
And they're not trying to jam advertising in the side door while they're presenting content to you in the front door.
Mm-hmm. The media's web product has suffered really rapid shitification that has made it completely unusable. And I think, that's absolutely true. What I wonder is, like, why hasn't there been a Shopify for media where I can just... The part of it is friction.
There has. It's called Substack. It's called.
But they're
Medium.
terrible. They're all terrible. Shopify is an incredible
Apple
experience.
News. I can't stand anytime you put an Apple News link, I have to then Google it.
And that sucks. Yeah. But what I'm saying is, if you look at, and I've
Did
said
you hear
this
what
before,
he just said, Alex? Don't send Apple News links in the chat anymore to Brian.
It's a microaggression.
Aren't we all like on iOS devices?
Don't make those kinds of assumptions, Alex.
Okay, that's true.
Which is to say, by the way, I'm going to show up as a green bubble in the coming months. And
you're going to Android?
That'll last 3 weeks.
Well, that new number 10, the Pixel 10.
I got it. It looks great. It'll last 3 weeks, Troy. Oh, what's the over under? Like, there's no way you last longer than 3 weeks.
I can zoom in 100x.
Yeah, sure.
You'll get less advertising because the algorithms say that you're less valuable.
Let's before we open another tab on that 100x zoom, which is interesting. Just before that, there is no Shopify for media, and we can say Patreon is a thing and Substack is a thing. I think both of these companies have completely shat the bed on delivering products that are actually useful. Payment is a pain in the ass on Patreon. Patreon is a terrible video experience. Substack, we're trying to push our podcast through that. All their tools are severely lacking. Everything that they're adding are things that we don't want. Meanwhile, Shopify is a great product, great UX. Consumers and store owners love it. Like, it's just we don't have the right product in media. Substack and Patreon are products that feel 10 years behind at this stage.
I think in some ways it's because the market, I'm making this up as I go along, but I think because of the size of the market, everyone wants to be Amazon versus Shopify, because you have to take more and that's why it was inevitable that Substack would go in this direction to be more like Amazon than to be Shopify, because the models don't work like if you're venture funded to be.
I mean, at the same time, I kind of wish we had more Shopifys. I think they're doing stuff that is actually genuinely supportive of small businesses and better for the web. I'm sure there's issues, but
and they haven't tried to take control of the relationship. They haven't. You're transacting with the merchant, and Shopify is powering that. But that's great. It's like Stripe. I love Stripe because nobody knows. The regular people don't even know Stripe. And like, it's what, 1-2% of world GDP. Great. Do the job in the background. It works flawlessly.
Absolutely. But I think there's room if anybody wants to raise some money to start building the Shopify for media. I think there's room. Can I just talk about, you're talking about the Google Pixel 10 being able to zoom 100 times, 100x. So Google announced a phone which allows you to zoom in 100 times. It is actually physically impossible to do that with the optics. So what you're doing is actually you're zooming in 100 times. It looks very pixelated what you're actually shooting. But then they use generative AI to guess the picture that you're taking. So you're not zooming 100%. You're zooming 100% and then generating an image that you can call a photo. And because they know that photo isn't real, I mean, no photo is real anymore. Everything's being touched by AI. But that photo is nearly fully generated to the point that if there's a human being, it will avoid scaling that human being up. That human being will remain blurry because they might make it look like somebody else. And I think we're going to be fed a lot of like the camera on the phone is the kind of the Trojan horse to get us to get used to generative images. People that are completely against generative art are generating images every day. No photo you're taking is actually the moment anymore.
Good take.
Okay.
Buy a Hasselblad.
Everything is distortion. Fantastic.
Everything.
Why don't you summarize your take on the activist investor at the New York
Okay,
Times?
well, the New York Times has a new activist investor. For some reason, they attract activist investor. And this is an alumni of a previous activist investor campaign against them from Value Act a few years back. Coincidentally, right when the New York Times was like taking off, it is the exception to the norm in the media industry, and it's actually successful business. This is from FiveSpan. I mean, it's two people. Let's be real here. They're activist investors. They're claiming that the New York Times is not, go figure, leaning into AI enough, and that they also should be doing more, also go figure, short form video, et cetera.
These are geniuses.
These are
geniuses.
I look at this. Look, this is a tough business, but I'm sorry. I find all of this kind of annoying and condescending, to be honest with you. I wish AB was here because he took it more seriously than I do. Troy, do you take this seriously?
No. Listen, if you're going to take over the New York Times, don't do it on account of them not using AI. I have three thoughts. If you're going to take it over, basically don't do it on account of them not running their business properly by leveraging technology to grow the subscription base or do more video or transition from, one medium text to one that the kids like. You do it because you want to hijack a, woke institution and, play with what really amounts to be the most powerful kind of media institution, in the liberal world. And, that would be fun to see. Personally, I'd like to see that. And I would hope at the same time that they force them to be more economical in how they create content, because the New York Times is, frequently commits abuses of article length. And
I would say I would become an investor, like an activist investor for that. Just shorter articles.
Yeah, shorter articles. What? If you just kind of get 6%, then 10%, and your whole rationale is shorter articles.
Yeah.
Alex, sell this video game company for like $1 billion and then become that kind of activist.
But the family has
great.
It's a dual structure. The family controls the business. No one's going to take it from them. Yeah, I mean, it's just I think that if they succeed at running up the stock price by shining a light on the attractiveness of the New York Times as a singular media entity in terms of its kind of power in the political space, and as its potential to kind of grow revenue per user because of that unique position that it occupies, then maybe you can invest a bit of money, turn a trick, and make a bit of cash. So fine. But as something more profound than that, I think it's not real.
I mean, the New York Times has 11.3 million.
It's real. I mean, it's big.
Like
big. It's unique.
It's unique. Very successful. I'm sure. Yeah. I mean, there's things that
they bridged into new media types really well, including audio, really well.
Yeah, and games.
What happened to Vivek Ramaswamy's hostile bid for? He was being an activist investor with BuzzFeed of all places. I don't know where that went.
Yeah, I don't know what happened.
But do you think this is like one of the guys at a bar and they say, you know what, they it's a good business, but it could be a better business if only they did short form video and AI shit. Do you think it came out as that, or do you think that the strategy is kind of cover for something else? Is that what you're saying?
I think you could see it as having more value. So you take a stock position, you build some energy around it, and you can't take control of it, but you can make some money. Yeah.
But is it that energy? So I was having a kebab in San Francisco, and I could overhear very loud, like two tech bros having a very loud conversation. How one of them just came back from Bali, and he knew exactly how they should fix their economy after a week there. They should just, like kind of remove and reshift their blah blah blah. And I was like, shit, yeah, that's the energy here, right? You spend a week in Bali, you did some
100%.
Mali, and now you want to just
Hilarious.
take over. Yeah, it's fantastic.
Hilarious. Okay. Well, I have a funny, good product, and it's certainly not Starbucks, that's for sure. But because I was waiting in Starbucks, the reason that's happened is I've been going to the physiotherapist, and I haven't done it in years. And I have two of my family members go to physio, and they love going. One of my siblings has a PhD in physiotherapy, of all things. So I went because I've destroyed my two fingers playing soccer, and they were dislocated, and I can't seem to get movement back in them. So
you're not meant to use your hands.
Yeah. So I'm committed to going to physio, and I love going. And I've been ordering all of these therapy gadgets, like this one that I have in my hand, which is a big rubber thing.
Yeah, that looks like something else.
Yeah.
I think we're just gonna cut that without context and put it on
but
TikTok.
I've got the putty to work my hands. I have these things that straighten my fingers. I have all types of these rubber things. I've got these things that allow you, that my son uses to practice guitar, or is to strengthen his guitar hand. And sitting there, and I go in. There's a robot receptionist, which I don't love, but it works. And I then get it passed to the back of the physio office. I sit down and I shoot the shit with the other people that are waiting on the physiotherapist, because I'm a social guy, and we talk about nothing. There's a TV playing above where you sit, and they've had Price is Right on for the last couple of sessions. Price is Right reminded me that it is the highest form of native advertising ever invented, where you can promote, a trip to Alaska on a cruise, or a Mitsubishi car that just isn't moving off the lot, or, like a rice cooker, and you can, present it as a game, and, millions of Americans will watch it and get excited by it still to this day. It also is a reminder of the effectiveness of Ozempic, which I think the host, the host is Drew Carey.
Yeah.
He's skinny now?
He's super skinny now. He's all zimped up. And, it's fun to watch. I had a discussion with the guy next to me, because I thought they should put it on the Travel Channel or the Smithsonian Channel, and he really liked Price is Right. And then the attentive physiotherapist, massaged my hand and gave me some exercises and really helped me. And I'm grateful to them. Good product.
Nice.
On the Ozempic thing, it is very strange when you see people you haven't seen in a while who got on that. And
Ozempic's a great product.
They're like shrunken versions of themselves, but they look completely...
I think I
barely
go back on
recognize
it. I went on it and I got a little skinnier, and now I porked up again. So I'm thinking of...
I tried it. I noticed that I was less anxious on it. And I think it's like I have kind of an addictive personality, and maybe that it helped.
I have a drawer full of it at home. You should try it next time you come by, Alex.
Well, where do you get it nowadays? Like everybody, it looks like the Ozempic company has been suing everyone.
I'm an investor in a company that sells this, so I get a special best friend price.
All right, hook me up.
But by the way, you can't take it without clinical advice, right? You need
Yeah,
a
no,
doctor.
of course you can. I'm kidding. I'm fine.
I don't hand out Ozempic to my friends. I just want to be.
He's just like,
One travel note from me. I just came back from Belgrade yesterday. Really interesting side effect in Belgrade is, Serbia is not a place with a lot of migration. Not a lot of people move to Serbia, but the numbers vary. They go from 40,000 to 100,000 Russians who moved to Belgrade when the war in Ukraine started. They didn't want to get drafted, et cetera. And they settled in Belgrade, and they've had a major impact on the city because they don't have a lot of migrants and they don't have a lot of outside communities. And they clump in certain areas. And there's this area, Dorchel, which is like the Lower East Side of Belgrade. And they have their own like cafes and restaurants there because these are all Russian hipsters. And they're very popular places because they're the one place in Belgrade you can go where smoking is not allowed. They don't let smoking happen inside. And they're very anti-caffeine too. They have no caffeine, and they're usually there's usually yoga involved, and they're very pet friendly. But they've developed their own like parallel economy, which
these people sound like they would have been unsuitable for fighting a war.
Right. No, that was what one Serb said. Well, because they're very I said, well, how is it with the Russians, being here? And this Serbian was like, these are the wrong Russians. He's like, we like the Russians that are like, the sort of like aggressive Russians. Well, we got the hipster Russians that want to be DJs. But they've like doubled rents. I think that's been a big problem because these are moneyed Russians that have come in. And so there's a little bit of friction there, but you have more non-smoking places.
Is that a good product? So I'm trying to just kind of
Russians in Belgrade. Yeah.
Russians in Belgrade. That's a great one. That may be the best one we have yet.
I went to a great like Russian cocktail.
You fucking criticized me for like bringing up a fig, which is a really wonderful product, that grows, with the hands and benevolence of nature. And you bring Russians in Belgrade?
Yeah. No, I mean, look, I went to a great cocktail bar, a Russian cocktail bar there. There was a dog running around. There usually is a dog running around somewhere.
This segment has stopped being relevant for people listening for a while now, Troy. And I think we're just like living with it. I was going to recommend the British West countryside. It's beautiful. Often overlooked, but it's a really nice thing about Europe is that
were you there with JD Vance? Was that where it was? A Cotswold? Tell me where that is.
He was part of the JD Vance security detail.
I am, but honestly, I think we keep saying how Europe's in trouble, and it might be, but every time you go to Europe, like you'll drive through, and then you'll find this 15th century manor house that's been turned into a really tasteful lodge with a gallery in it. Things are way cheaper than in California. The food was amazing. It's a good life, It's not bad. You can deal. We had great weather, so one of the reasons I wouldn't live there is the rest of the time it's probably not that nice. But the quality of life in Europe remains really good. And I know that there are issues, but I think that there's some stuff from there that we could kind of import, at times. Just like good living.
I've been debating spending more like a chunk of time there a year. Like it's either Florida or Italy.
It's both. That's what I do.
There's definitely a contingent of wealthy Americans who say living in America is great, but they travel to Europe for their vacations or for their healthcare. The amount of Americans in Monaco getting healthcare there.
I engaged in some Serbian healthcare while I was there. But honestly, good healthcare. It's amazing, like the price. Like I got blood work done, and this is at a private clinic, and it was like $40. An abdominal like ultrasound is $40.
When we were in London, our kid had a rash, and we asked the hotel if we could find a doctor, and they said, "Well, do you want them to come to the room?" And we're like, "Okay, how much is that going to cost?" And they're like, "Oh, £150." I was like, Jesus Christ. How does that even work? How does that even happen? And I forgot. So I don't know. I think as Europe is in decline, as I keep hearing, it's going to be interesting how some of these things change. There's definitely a lot of these social support structures that are going to have to be adjusted.
We should also look at parts of British Columbia, Alex, like the San Juan Islands is a nice choice. Not far from
Canada's. Yeah, that's true.
On that note, let's wrap it up.
That's it for this episode of People versus Algorithms, where each week we uncover patterns shaping media, culture, and technology. Big thanks, as always, to our producer, Vanya Arsenov. She always makes us a little clearer and more understandable, and we appreciate her very, very much. If you're enjoying these conversations, we'd love for you to leave us a review. It helps us get the word out and keeps our community growing. Remember, you can find People versus Algorithms on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, and now on YouTube. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again next week.